What's up, guys? Here are my predictions for UFC and ESPN 12 happening this Saturday. Dustin Poirier vs. Dan Hooker. The card is not that bad. There are a few fights that are pretty interesting, such as Jinyu Frey versus Kay Hansen is actually a bit anticipated because of Jinyu Frey making her long-awaited debut in the UFC. She's been in Invicta forever and was a former champion, but she's going up to 115 to fight a bigger Kay Hansen, and I believe that's going to be a little bit difficult for her to compete up against. The size difference is definitely going to be a factor in that fight. You also have Takashi Sato versus Ramiz Brahimaj, which is going to be the striker versus wrestler matchup. Really interesting, both pack a lot of power in their hands. But before we get to the fight that I'm very excited for, we have to note that the card is pretty short, has 11 fights where usually has at least 12. So you're probably going to see a lot of commercial breaks and stuff, a lot of time between fights, and because there's going to be a lot of time to kill. And a great way to pass the time is by playing my new favorite game, Raid Shadow Legends. With so many fun features, from different ways to level up your champion, to playing against the bosses that the game provides, and my favorite, playing up against other players around the world. And this game has an awesome way to establish your own community inside the game by creating a clan. And the thing I love most about it is that it can be very challenging, making you have to think a little bit more, as well as making you go through different factions. With my personal favorite being the awesome looking Night Revenant, and also found that they're much easier to use to get through the campaign a lot quicker. And the champion I like the best is the Miscreated Monster. And competitive tournaments are one of the best aspects of the game. By challenging yourself in these ongoing tournaments, competing up against the entire raid community while fighting the Spider's Den, Ice Golem's Peak, the Almighty Fire Knight, or the Notorious Dragon in order to win awesome rewards and rare artifacts. What can easily start as a quick mobile game to pass the time between each fight during a UFC event can quickly turn into a game that you are playing more than you thought you would have in the first place. Just go to the video description and click on the special links where you can download Raid Shadow Legends mobile or even on your desktop. If you're a new player, you'll get 100,000 silver plus one free champion, the Epic Jotun. All of this will be waiting for new players here, and only for the next 30 days. Luis Pena versus Kamaworthy. I am very excited about this fight. Two prospects of the stacked lightweight division, and because it's so stacked, man, these prospects need to really showcase their skills and put on a performance. Luis Pena has been a prospect pretty much his entire UFC career, but everybody's just waiting for that breakout performance, He has the look, he has the size, he's 6'3", and he has a very engaging style, right? Quite flashy, and he's very well-rounded. But it's going to be hard to do something against Kamaworthy, to be honest, because Kamaworthy packs on a lot more power, he's a lot more experience when it comes to just overall fights, and he's a bit older, which is kind of surprising because Pena only has 10 professional fights, and he's 26 years old. Over half of his fights have been in the UFC though, so he has a lot of UFC experience, a lot of experience fighting at the highest level, and he trains with an amazing camp at AKA, so his wrestling is getting work constantly, daily, and this is a time for him to start showcasing those skills offensively, because even though he's the less quote-unquote experienced fighter, he's a lot more well-rounded. He has better kicks, his boxing is really disruptive, he puts combinations together very well, he actually has better basic fundamental boxing than Kamaworthy, and his wrestling and jiu-jitsu are just on an entirely different level. Kamaworthy pretty much boxes for the most part, he doesn't use much else. He goes with leg kicks here and there, and I do expect him to go for a lot of leg kicks against the long stance Luis Pena, who doesn't check kicks almost at all, but there is now the wrestling threat, and I think Pena should go that route. If he doesn't, he's going to make this fight a lot harder than it should be. Because Kamaworthy, let's say he gets out-techniqued, let's say he's getting peppered by jabs from a distance. The guy has fight-changing power. One punch is enough to put out anybody, and his punches come at the weirdest angles. If Pena's going to be using his reach, don't get too comfortable, man, because when Kamaworthy charges at him, those punches are going to be flying at angles you don't even learn in a geometry class. And we saw that when he knocked out Devontae Smith in his last fight, where he was a huge underdog, a 6 or 7-1 underdog, and he knocked him out in the first round with this weird left hook that landed on the temple. And after doing some research, watching some of his fights, he lands that check left hook on a lot of people. He's really good at moving his head away from punches and comes over the top. Now, the angle's always different for the hook though. Sometimes it's angling downward, sometimes it's angling upward, sometimes it's kind of slapping you with it, sometimes his elbow's tucked in, sometimes it's not, and that creates a very different angle to get around guards. And Kamaworthy is 100% a more dangerous striker moving backwards and countering than he is moving forward. When he moves forward, he's a lot more vulnerable. He winds up and telegraphs all of his punches, and he throws a lot of hooks, and his hands usually drop to his hips, before he throws them. That could be very disastrous if Luis Pena starts countering with that straight right hand or straight left, depending what stance he wants to take, flying knees and stuff, you know. And Kamaworthy is going to have to be the one that's moving forward a bit because Pena is much longer and he's very good at keeping that distance on you. But my prediction for this fight, I'm going to have to go Luis Pena. I like Kamaworthy a lot. I think he'd be pretty promising. He's a very unorthodox fighter, very unorthodox boxing, and because of that, everybody's in danger. But with the skills that Pena has and him going to wrestling a lot more than before, he should be able to win this fight, and I think by a late submission. And then we go to the co-main event. Mike Perry versus Mickey Gall. You know what's mind-boggling to me about this? These two guys are both 28 years old, and I just cannot get past that. Everybody knew those kids in school who were either like Mike Perry or either like Mickey Gall. And we always knew those two kids never got along. I could see Mike Perry really try to be physical in this fight and put it on Mickey Gall early. Striking wise, Mickey Gall doesn't have much for Mike Perry. Even though he might cash him with some longer punches and maybe a little bit more technical with his check left hook, the power and the ferocity and the composure on the feet are worlds apart. Mike Perry can end Mickey Gall with one punch. He's very composed under the fire. He's very comfortable in chaos. Mickey Gall, though, is a much better grappler. The thing is, does he have the takedowns to take down Mike Perry? He is a lot harder to take down than people think, and mainly because his clinch game and his balance there is so strong. If Gall starts clinching up with Mike Perry, which he loves to do with opponents, you saw that a lot with Sage Northcutt, he's going to get torn to pieces, 100%. Mike Perry's a good brawler. He's really good at making the best results out of chaos, but where he's the most technical and the hardest to deal with is definitely in the clinch. He's actually very hard to hand fight, very hard to grab wrist control on, very hard to position well up against, because he's always working. He's very physically strong, and he's extremely quick to land the knees and the elbows. We've seen an elbow knockout from the clinch. We saw a couple knee knockouts from the clinch. In the clinch, Mike Perry's going to have a huge advantage, and especially Mickey Gall's not going to be able to take him to the ground from there. So he's going to just start shooting a bit. He doesn't want to stay in the clinch, so shooting the double leg, shooting the single leg, trying to drag it down, maybe pull guard, something like that. Because where Mike Perry is really lacking, yes, some of his technical striking is not really there, and his technical grappling is not really there. A lot of it's on his fight IQ. Even though he's getting better and making better decisions as of late, what he did against Donald Cerrone is very hard to look over, right? Taking down Donald Cerrone when that was the last thing he should have done, and everybody knew it coming into that fight. His best way of winning that fight was staying on the feet and brawling it out. He took him to the ground. So that aspect of Mike Perry making those weird, questionable decisions is always something that can get him into trouble. And if he goes and takes on Mickey Gall because he feels he's so much stronger, maybe he wants to prove a point on the ground, right? To get in the clinch, he finds himself kind of handling Mickey Gall a bit, and he decides, oh, I'm just going to take him to the ground. That's always a thing that can happen for Mike Perry. And that's the biggest thing that's going to make it really hard to go with Mike Perry or go with Mickey Gall. And not just inside the octagon, but also outside of it. Mike Perry's coming into this fight with one coach, one corner person, and that is his new girlfriend. I don't know how credentialed she is. I don't know how much she's involved in MMA or anything like that. But to most people, it's a very unprecedented thing. It's a very unique way he's going about it, as usual for Mike Perry, and that makes it even more unpredictable. How did his training go? If he's just training with his girlfriend, who I've seen him hit pads with, and it doesn't look the prettiest, right? I mean, she could barely hold the pads when he's hitting them, and it looks like he has to take it easy. Doesn't look like a stable training camp. I don't even know, man. I don't know, but if anybody can come off without a training camp or something like that and perform on fight night, Mike Perry might be one of them, you know? But there's a couple big things to note here. One, Mike Perry's coming off 2 losses. One split decision against Vicente Luque, where most people thought that he won. And then the bad loss to Jeff Neal by first round TKO, the first knockout loss of his entire career, which can absolutely do a number on someone's mindset. Being knocked out for the first time in your career is a big thing, man. It's a big thing to get over. So there was a mental battle for sure that we do not know the result of. And as for Mickey Gall hasn't fought in almost a year, right? August 3rd of 2019. So a young guy like him who only has 8 professional fights in his career, I wonder what kind of strides he made in the gym, because he's coming off a win, and I have to think he's been working on his striking and maybe wrestling a lot more specifically for this fight. So that can make this fight very hard to predict. If Mickey Gall comes out there a lot better than we think, right? If he comes out there with a respectable takedown game, Mike Perry's gonna be in trouble. But if his takedowns are stuffed, you would have to say Mike Perry wins this fight, for sure. All of that going into my prediction, I'm going to have to go with Mike Perry. Again, Mike Perry's more powerful. He has better striking overall, way better in the clinch. He can initiate the clinch or if Miguel starts to panic a bit, he might instinctively engage in the clinch. So I'm going to go with Mike Perry, and I'm going to go by a second round TKO. And then we go to the main event. This is an amazing fight. This fight could be in a main card of a pay-per-view or something. The former champ, Dustin Poirier, versus the up-and-coming Dan Hooker. They're both very experienced, but Dustin Poirier is much more experienced at the highest level. Dan Hooker hasn't really been at the highest level that long, only a couple fights. And he's much more of a striker than anything, right? He doesn't really have a big takedown game. Takedown defense is pretty good, but hasn't fought the best wrestlers or takedown artists of either the featherweight or lightweight divisions yet. He's been fighting a lot of strikers. He does very well. He has a really well-timed knee, a respectable offensive boxing game, really good at just letting the jab go and letting the overhand go, extremely composed under the fire, and I think it's a lot of credit due to his training with Israel Adesanya on a consistent basis. He doesn't usually gas out, and because of those aspects, he's always in the fight and always trying to strike back, but you see a lot that he just gets hit, and a reason for that is his hands are never up. And even when they're down, he's open to body shots like you saw against Enzo Barboza, who completely ravaged his body. I mean, what Barboza did to him should be considered a crime. It's weird. His defense is just not necessarily there. He's good with head movement. He's good at moving away from punches entirely, but not really good at blocking shots or parrying a lot of punches and stuff like that. And the reason why that has to be noted is because Dustin Poirier is a combination puncher. For instance, if Dan Hooker pulls back on the jab of Dustin Poirier, the left straight is coming and then the right hook's coming after that, and now the left uppercut when he's in close, and now the right hook to end it all, right? You can't just move away from Dustin Poirier's punches that well, unless he's looking to just snipe you like he did against Khabib, but he did that for a reason. The wrestling threat was too much. He tried to one-shot Khabib instead of setting up combinations, where maybe he thought that Khabib would have answered with some takedowns. But in this fight, Dustin Poirier, just like what he did against Justin Gaethje, and just like he did against most of his opponents, Eddie Alvarez, etc., he's going to let the hands go. He's going to let the combinations fly. The biggest danger for Dustin Poirier is that initial attack, because that is where Dan Hooker is going to be a huge threat. The knees, the elbows, the counter shots. He is the longer fighter. Dustin Poirier is going to have to find to get into that distance safely to where he could start his combination. The start of his combination is going to be the battle for him. After he gets that first shot in and he can continue the combination, that's where he's going to deliver a lot of damage on Dan Hooker. But here's the big thing. Now, a lot of people are talking about this going to be a striking match and, you know, who's the better striker? It could be pretty competitive on the feet. Dustin Poirier is much better on the ground. He has a good takedown game, like you saw against Anthony Pettis. You saw it against Joe Duffy. Joe Duffy, you can actually compare a little bit to Dan Hooker, and look how Dustin Poirier shut down that guy's game. And even though Joe Duffy has a respectable grappling game as well, I think he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. 100% Dustin Poirier is going to use the wrestling, use the takedowns against Dan Hooker. The reason why you haven't seen them as of late, look who Dustin Poirier has been fighting. Khabib, Max Holloway, Justin Gaethje, and Eddie Alvarez. It's probably a smart thing not to go for your takedowns against those guys. Maybe Max Holloway, but Max Holloway has shown to have a really good takedown defensive game. And Dustin Poirier was very confident to just stay on the feet and not try to go through that path of resistance. Against Khabib, Eddie Alvarez, and Justin Gaethje, of course he's not going to attempt a lot of takedowns. Dan Hooker is an exception. I expect Dustin Poirier to put a well-rounded game onto Dan Hooker that can make his striking actually be more beneficial and have more advantageous positions, start landing a little bit more, and getting in that well-timed double leg takedown is also going to directly help Dustin Poirier's entries for striking, which is, again, the most difficult part for Dustin Poirier to get past. Hooker is going to respect it, he's going to expect a takedown, and all of a sudden, Dustin Poirier fakes slow, comes up with a jab, and now he's right inside Dan Hooker's face. So that goes right to my prediction for this fight. I'm going to have to go with Dustin Poirier. The way I can see Dustin Poirier losing this fight is if he just gets caught by trying to find his entry. Again, that's where the danger comes in. When he tries to find his entry, and he just gets caught. I could possibly see a trading scenario happening and Dustin Poirier not having the better chin, getting cracked in a wild exchange and just getting dropped. I can see that as well, of course. But the technical aspect is where I see Dan Hooker possibly finding that chin as Dustin Poirier is trying to make an entry for his strikes. But I think Dustin Poirier is going to have the better boxing game. I think he's slightly a better striker. I think his grappling and wrestling are going to be a big difference in this fight. I see him winning by a Darce choke. I'm going to be very specific here. I see him winning by a Darce choke in the third round. And then we look at the betting odds here. So I'm a little bit surprised why they have Kay Hansen as a favorite over Jinh Yu Frey. Maybe the size difference, maybe the wrestling factor of it, because Jinh Yu Frey is more of a striker than anything, and she has had a bit of a difficult time against wrestlers in the past. Maybe that's what it is. It's never a smart thing to have a big favorite in a wild heavyweight fight that can end with one punch, such as Jean Vellante versus Maurice Green. So I can see either of them winning that fight, to be honest. And everything else I pretty much agree with. So I hope you guys enjoyed the predictions, and if you did, make sure to thumbs up. If you enjoyed my content, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.